The notification sound from my phone cut through the silence of my home office like a knife. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I was still hunched over my laptop, debugging code for the cybersecurity firm I'd founded 8 years ago. The message was from my wife Jessica's Instagram account, a photo of her and her girlfriends at what appeared to be an upscale wine bar downtown. She looked radiant in the dim lighting, her blonde hair catching the ambient glow, wearing the black dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last month. Girls' night out. Love my amazing friends. 2 hearts, read the caption, followed by a string of heart and wine glass emojis. I smiled and double-tapped to like the photo, then returned to my work. Jessica had been going out more frequently with her college friends lately, which I encouraged. After 12 years of marriage, I understood the importance of maintaining friendships and having personal space. At 38, I'd built a successful cybersecurity company from the ground up, and the long hours had sometimes made me less attentive to Jessica's social needs. Her renewed enthusiasm for girls' nights seemed like a healthy development. My name is Ryan Matthews, and I've spent the better part of 2 decades understanding how digital systems work, and more importantly, how they can be compromised. What I didn't realize that Tuesday night was that I was about to use every skill I'd learned in cybersecurity to uncover the most devastating betrayal of my life. The first red flag came 3 weeks later. Jessica had been increasingly secretive about her phone, taking it with her to the bathroom, keeping it face down during dinner, and sleeping with it under her pillow instead of on the nightstand where she'd always kept it. When I mentioned it casually, she laughed it off, claiming she'd been getting spam calls and didn't want to be disturbed. But it was her behavior that really caught my attention. Jessica had always been affectionate, quick to hug, kiss, and show physical intimacy. Lately, she seemed distant, distracted, as if her mind was somewhere else even when we were together. Our conversations had become superficial, focused on logistics and schedules rather than the deeper connection we'd always shared. The second red flag was financial. As someone who managed our family's cybersecurity, I monitored all our accounts for suspicious activity. I noticed charges I didn't recognize, expensive lunches at restaurants I'd never heard of, purchases at boutique stores that weren't Jessica's usual shopping destinations, and hotel charges that didn't align with any business trips or family visits I knew about. When I asked Jessica about the hotel charge, she explained that she'd booked a room for her friend Sarah, who was going through a messy divorce and needed a place to stay for a few nights. It was plausible, and Jessica had always been generous with friends in need. But something about her explanation felt rehearsed, as if she'd been preparing for the question. The third red flag was technological. Jessica had always been somewhat careless with digital security, using simple passwords, leaving accounts logged in, and generally trusting that our home network was secure. Recently, she'd become much more cautious, changing passwords, logging out of accounts, and even asking me about VPNs and encrypted messaging apps. For someone in my profession, these behavioral changes were like neon signs flashing, "Investigate." But this wasn't a corporate client or a suspicious network intrusion. This was my wife, the woman I'd loved for 15 years and been married to for 12. The thought of surveilling her felt like a violation of everything our marriage was supposed to represent. But the doubt was eating at me. I found myself analyzing her every word, looking for inconsistencies in her stories, and paying attention to details I'd never noticed before. The way she smiled when texting, the frequency of her girls' nights, the new lingerie I'd found in her drawer that she'd never worn for me. I tried to dismiss my suspicions as paranoia brought on by work stress and too many years of thinking like a cybersecurity expert. But the evidence kept accumulating, and my professional instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The breaking point came on a Friday evening in October. Jessica announced that she was going to spend the weekend at a spa retreat with her friend Michelle, a last-minute opportunity that had come up through Michelle's work. She seemed excited about the prospect of relaxation and girl time, and I encouraged her to go, even offering to pay for any additional treatments she wanted. After she left, I sat in our empty house, surrounded by the life we'd built together. Photos from our wedding, vacations we'd taken, the home office where I'd built my business while she supported my dreams. The silence was deafening, and the doubt was overwhelming. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to use my professional skills to either confirm my suspicions or put them to rest once and for all. If Jessica was having an affair, I would find the evidence. If she wasn't, I would know for certain and could work on addressing whatever was causing my paranoia. I started with the basics, digital forensics techniques I used for corporate investigations. Our home network logged all device activity, and as the administrator, I had access to metadata that most people never realize exists. I could see which devices connected to our Wi-Fi when they connected and what services they accessed. The first thing I discovered was that Jessica's phone had been connecting to our network at times when she claimed to be elsewhere. The spa weekend, for instance, her phone had been active on our home Wi-Fi until 3 a.m. on Friday night, hours after she'd supposedly left for the retreat. Either she'd forgotten her phone at home, which was unlikely given her recent attachment to it, or she'd never left at all. I dug deeper into the network logs and found something even more disturbing. For the past 3 months, there had been a second device regularly connecting to our Wi-Fi, a device I didn't recognize. The MAC address wasn't registered to any device Jessica or I owned, and it appeared most frequently during times when I was at work and Jessica was supposedly home alone. My hands were shaking as I cross-referenced the timestamps with Jessica's social media posts and the stories she'd told me about her activities. The pattern was clear. Whenever Jessica claimed to be out with friends or at work events, this unknown device was connected to our network. Someone had been in our house, regularly, for months. I felt sick to my stomach, but I forced myself to continue the investigation. Using techniques I'd developed for tracking corporate espionage, I began monitoring Jessica's digital footprint more systematically. I couldn't access her phone directly without her knowledge, but I could track the digital shadows she left behind. Social media metadata revealed location data that contradicted her stated whereabouts. Credit card records showed a pattern of charges that painted a picture of a double life. Most damning of all, I discovered that Jessica had created new email accounts and social media profiles that she'd never mentioned to me. Using open-source intelligence gathering techniques, I was able to piece together fragments of this hidden digital life. The new Instagram account, created 6 months ago, featured photos of Jessica that I'd never seen. Intimate shots taken in locations I didn't recognize, with captions that suggested a level of happiness and excitement that had been missing from our marriage. But it was the comments on these photos that broke my heart. A man named Derek consistently liked and commented on every post, using language that was far too familiar for a casual acquaintance. Beautiful as always. Can't wait to see you tonight. You make me so happy. The kind of comments a boyfriend would leave, not a friend. I ran Derek's profile through every database and social media platform I could access. Derek Morrison, 35 years old, divorced, worked as a personal trainer at an upscale gym downtown. His own social media presence painted the picture of a man who enjoyed the single life, expensive cars, exotic vacations, and a seemingly endless stream of attractive women. But for the past 6 months, his posts had focused almost exclusively on one woman. He never tagged Jessica or mentioned her by name, but the photos told the story. Romantic dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways to wine country, intimate moments captured in hotel rooms and private settings. The timeline was devastating. Jessica's affair had begun almost exactly 6 months ago, right around the time she'd started going to a new gym, the same gym where Derek worked. She'd told me she wanted to get in better shape, to feel more confident about herself. I'd been supportive, even paying for the expensive membership and personal training sessions. I'd been paying for my wife to meet her lover. The realization hit me like a physical blow. For 6 months, I'd been funding Jessica's affair, encouraging her self-improvement, and celebrating what I thought was her renewed confidence and happiness. Every girls' night out had been a date with Derek. Every work event had been a rendezvous. Every spa weekend had been a romantic getaway. But the betrayal went deeper than just the affair. Jessica had been systematically lying to me for months, creating an elaborate fiction to cover her tracks. She'd involved our friends in her deception, using them as alibis and cover stories. She'd manipulated my trust, my generosity, and my love to facilitate her relationship with another man. As I sat in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal, I felt something cold and calculating settle over me. The hurt was overwhelming, but underneath it was a growing anger, not just at Jessica's infidelity, but at the elaborate deception she'd constructed. She'd turned our entire marriage into a lie, and she'd done it with a level of sophistication that suggested she'd been planning this for a long time. That's when I decided that simply confronting Jessica wasn't enough. If she wanted to play games with deception and manipulation, then I would show her what a real expert could do. I would use every tool at my disposal to expose her affair, document her lies, and ensure that when our marriage ended, the truth would be undeniable. But I wouldn't just gather evidence for a divorce. I would orchestrate a revelation that would expose Jessica's betrayal to everyone who mattered: her family, her friends, her colleagues, and Derek himself. She'd spent months carefully constructing a web of lies. I would systematically tear it down. The plan I developed was methodical and comprehensive. First, I would gather irrefutable evidence of the affair: photos, videos, communications, and financial records that would leave no room for denial or explanation. Second, I would document the full scope of Jessica's deception, showing how she'd manipulated not just me, but everyone around us. Third, I would expose the affair in a way that would maximize the consequences for both Jessica and Derek. I started by installing discreet surveillance equipment throughout our house. As a cybersecurity expert, I had access to professional-grade cameras and recording devices that were virtually undetectable. I placed them in strategic locations: the living room, bedroom, kitchen, and home office, anywhere Jessica might bring Derek or conduct private conversations. The first recordings were devastating. Within a week, I had video evidence of Jessica and Derek together in our home, in our bed, making love with a passion that had been missing from our marriage for years. But it wasn't just the physical betrayal that hurt. It was listening to their conversations about me. "Ryan's so clueless," Jessica said in one recording, lying naked next to Derek in the bed I'd shared with her for 12 years. "He actually thinks I'm getting in shape for him. He has no idea that I'm doing it for you." "What about when he finds out?" Derek asked, running his fingers through her hair. "He won't," Jessica replied confidently. "Ryan's brilliant with computers, but he's completely oblivious when it comes to people. He trusts me completely. He'd never think to question anything I tell him. And if he does find out," Jessica shrugged, "then I'll take him for everything he's worth in the divorce. I've been documenting his work hours, his travel, his emotional unavailability. I can paint him as a neglectful husband who drove me into another man's arms. With his business assets and our property, I'll be set for life." The casual cruelty of her words was breathtaking. Jessica wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to destroy me financially and emotionally if I discovered her betrayal. She'd been documenting evidence against me while conducting her affair, preparing for a divorce that would leave me devastated and broke. But what she didn't know was that I was documenting everything too. And unlike her amateur attempts at building a case, I had the skills and resources to create an airtight record of her infidelity and deception. Over the next month, I gathered evidence with the precision of a federal investigation. I tracked Jessica's movements using GPS data from her phone and car. I recorded her conversations with Derek, both in person and over the phone. I documented every lie she told me, every false alibi, every manipulation. I also began investigating Derek more thoroughly. What I found was disturbing. Derek had a pattern of targeting married women, particularly those whose husbands were successful and financially stable. Jessica wasn't his first affair with a married client. She was part of a pattern of predatory behavior that had been going on for years. I reached out to Derek's previous victims, women whose marriages had been destroyed by his manipulations. What I learned was that Derek was essentially a professional homewrecker, using his position as a personal trainer to seduce wealthy married women, then encouraging them to leave their husbands for him. Once the divorces were finalized and the women had received their settlements, Derek would move on to his next target. Jessica wasn't Derek's girlfriend. She was his mark. And she was too blinded by infatuation to see that she was being played just as much as I was. Armed with this knowledge, I began planning the final phase of my revenge. I would expose Jessica's affair in a way that would not only end our marriage but also protect other potential victims from Derek's predatory behavior. I would ensure that both of them faced consequences that went far beyond a simple divorce. The opportunity came in the form of Jessica's birthday party. She'd been planning an elaborate celebration for weeks, inviting family, friends, and colleagues to a party at our house. It was supposed to be a surprise that I was organizing, but Jessica had been dropping hints about what she wanted, where she wanted it held, and who she wanted invited. What she didn't know was that I'd been planning my own surprise. I spent weeks preparing for the party, but not in the way Jessica expected. I created a comprehensive presentation that documented her affair with Derek, complete with photos, videos, audio recordings, and financial evidence. I prepared copies of all the evidence for her family, her friends, and her employer. I even contacted Derek's gym and provided them with evidence of his pattern of targeting married clients. But the centerpiece of my plan was a video presentation that would play during the party, revealing Jessica's betrayal to everyone who mattered to her. I'd edited together the most damning evidence into a narrative that would leave no doubt about what had been happening for the past 6 months. The night of the party, our house was filled with people who loved and respected Jessica. Her parents, her siblings, her closest friends, her colleagues from the marketing firm where she worked. They'd all come to celebrate the woman they thought they knew, the devoted wife, the loyal friend, the ethical professional. Derek was there too, having been invited as Jessica's personal trainer, who had helped her achieve her fitness goals. He mingled with the crowd, charming Jessica's friends and family, playing the role of the helpful professional who had transformed their daughter's life. As I watched them interact, I felt a cold satisfaction. In a few minutes, everyone in this room would know exactly what kind of people Jessica and Derek really were. I waited until the traditional birthday toast, when everyone had gathered in the living room with their drinks raised. Before we toast Jessica, I announced, I have a special surprise, a video montage of some of Jessica's most memorable moments from this past year. The lights dimmed, and the large screen TV came to life. But instead of the heartwarming birthday video everyone expected, they saw something very different. The first image was a screenshot of Jessica's secret Instagram account, showing her in Derek's arms with the caption, 6 months of pure happiness. The room fell silent as people tried to process what they were seeing. The next slide showed the timeline of Jessica's lies, every girl's night out. That was actually a date with Derek, every work event. That was actually a romantic rendezvous, every spa weekend. That was actually a getaway with her lover. Then came the audio recordings. Jessica's voice filled the room as she described her contempt for me, her plans to take me for everything in a divorce, and her confidence that she could manipulate everyone around her. The final segment showed Derek's pattern of targeting married women, complete with testimonials from his previous victims and evidence of his predatory behavior. By the time the presentation ended, the room was in complete silence. Jessica stood frozen in the center of the room, her face white with shock and horror. Derek had quietly slipped out during the video, abandoning Jessica to face the consequences alone. Jessica's mother was the first to speak. "How could you do this?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How could you betray Ryan like this? How could you lie to all of us?" Jessica's friends and colleagues began leaving without a word, their faces showing a mixture of disgust and disappointment. Her siblings confronted her directly, expressing their shame and anger at her behavior. Her father, a man who had always treated me like a son, shook my hand and apologized for his daughter's actions. Within an hour, the house was empty except for Jessica and me. She sat on the couch where she'd made love to Derek just days before, crying and trying to explain herself. "Ryan, I can explain," she began, but I held up my hand to stop her. "There's nothing to explain, Jessica. I have 6 months of evidence documenting your affair, your lies, and your plans to destroy me in a divorce. I know about Derek's pattern of targeting married women. I know about your secret social media accounts, your hidden email addresses, and your elaborate deception. It wasn't supposed to happen like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, it wasn't," I agreed. "You were supposed to manipulate me for a few more months, then blindside me with divorce papers and take half of everything I've worked for. You were supposed to ride off into the sunset with Derek, leaving me devastated and broke. Jessica looked up at me with something that might have been hope. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll end things with Derek. I shook my head. Derek's already ended things with you, Jessica. He left the party the moment his pattern was exposed. You were never his girlfriend, you were his mark. He was using you just like you were using me. The realization hit her like a physical blow. What do you mean? I showed her the evidence I'd gathered about Derek's previous affairs, his pattern of targeting wealthy married women, and his history of abandoning them once their usefulness was exhausted. Derek never loved you, I explained. He was grooming you for a divorce that would leave you with a substantial settlement, which he would then help you spend. Once your money was gone, he would have moved on to his next victim. You were just another mark in a long line of women he's manipulated and discarded. Jessica's world was crumbling around her, and I felt no sympathy. She'd spent months planning to destroy my life, manipulating my trust and love to facilitate her affair. She'd involved our friends and family in her deception, turning our entire social circle into unwitting accomplices to her betrayal. What happens now? She asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices, I replied. I've already filed for divorce, citing adultery and providing comprehensive evidence of your affair. I've documented your plans to defraud me in a divorce settlement, which will be used to protect my assets. I've also shared evidence of Derek's predatory behavior with his employer and previous victims, who are considering legal action. And us. There is no us, Jessica. There hasn't been for 6 months. You destroyed our marriage the moment you decided to have an affair. You destroyed any possibility of reconciliation when you planned to take me for everything in a divorce. You destroyed any respect I might have had for you when you involved our friends and family in your lies. Jessica left that night, moving in with her sister while she tried to figure out her next steps. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. With the evidence I'd gathered, Jessica had no choice but to accept a minimal settlement that protected my business assets and our shared property. Derek's life unraveled even more quickly. His employer terminated him after learning about his pattern of targeting married clients. Several of his previous victims came forward with their own stories, leading to a civil lawsuit that would follow him for years. His reputation in the fitness industry was destroyed, and he was forced to leave town to escape the consequences of his actions. But the most satisfying outcome was the impact on Jessica's social and professional life. Her betrayal had been witnessed by everyone who mattered to her: family, friends, and colleagues. The elaborate deception she'd constructed was exposed in the most public and humiliating way possible. She lost not just her marriage, but her reputation, her social circle, and the respect of everyone who had once admired her. 6 months after the birthday party that changed everything, I sat in my home office, looking out at the city lights and reflecting on the events that had transformed my life. The house felt different now, cleaner, somehow, as if Jessica's deception had been a poison that was finally purged from the air. I'd learned valuable lessons about trust, about the importance of paying attention to warning signs, and about the power of information in the digital age. But most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth. It's ensuring that the consequences match the scope of the betrayal. Jessica had spent months planning to destroy my life through manipulation and deception. In the end, I'd used her own methods against her, but with a level of skill and precision that she could never match. She'd underestimated the man she'd married, assuming that my technical expertise didn't extend to understanding human nature. She was wrong. The digital age had given people new ways to deceive and betray, but it had also given people like me new ways to uncover the truth. Every text message, every social media post, every digital transaction left a trail that could be followed by someone with the right skills and determination. Jessica and Derek had thought they were clever, using technology to facilitate their affair while covering their tracks. But they were amateurs playing in a professional's game. They left digital fingerprints everywhere, and I had the expertise to find them, analyze them, and use them to expose the truth. As I closed my laptop and prepared for bed, I felt a sense of closure that had been missing for months. The betrayal still hurt, and the end of my marriage was still painful. But justice had been served, and the truth had been revealed. Jessica and Derek had faced consequences that matched their actions, and other potential victims had been protected from Derek's predatory behavior. In the end, that was enough. The digital detective had solved his most personal case, and the guilty parties had been brought to justice. The marriage was over, but my integrity remained intact. I'd used my skills not for revenge, but for truth. And sometimes, that's the most powerful weapon of all. The notification sound from my phone broke the silence, but this time it didn't fill me with dread. It was a message from my attorney, confirming that the divorce had been finalized. I was officially free to start the next chapter of my life. I deleted the message and turned off the phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and hopefully, new relationships built on honesty and trust. But tonight, I was content to sit in the silence of my home, knowing that the truth had prevailed and justice had been served. The digital detective's work was done.